This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your specific situation. All opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The hosts and producers assume no liability for actions taken based on the content of this podcast.
Welcome to Health Yeah, the show where we make health feel a little less intimidating and a whole lot more fun. I'm Cheyenne, your co-host and resident comedic relief, here to keep things light. Hosting and leading the charge is Dr. David Pei, our medical mastermind who asks all the right questions. Beside us is Eva, co-host and producer, making sure the magic happens behind the scenes and on the mic. And of course, we've got John, the brains behind the operation and our co-producer, keeping us on track. Together, we're here to bring you real conversations, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs along the way. So buckle up, because when it comes to your health, the answer should always be health yeah. All right, Dr. Pei, what is on your mind today?
What is on my mind today? I'm thinking about leadership, influence, and the legacy that we lead.
David, I think that's a great subject to talk about because I don't think it's a coat that you take off when you get home. I think leadership matters whether you're standing in a boardroom or in your kitchen. And so I would love to talk about principles of good leadership.
So with that being on my mind, Eva, who do we have as our guest today?
Well, we have Dr. Carolyn Bannister with us today. She's not only an extraordinary physician leader, but she's our very dear friend, managed to raise a wonderful son who is now a successful anesthesiologist himself and the father of 3 beautiful little girls. Welcome, Dr. Bannister.
Thank you, Eva. Good to see you all.
Yes, welcome. So Dr. Bannister, just again to give some more background, in addition to her professional accomplishments, just for me personally and several of my colleagues, she helped us kind of really explore and understand leadership as influence, what servant leadership really means, but also knowing her as a friend, sustain that excellence for life at home. So I kind of wanted to preface that with throwing that out there.
Thank you for the invitation.
So I encounter you and also John and Eva have long history working with Carolyn, but you were the first leader in my life, actually. Dr. Bannister, that you were in a leadership position when the chair asked you out of the blue, would you be willing to be the chief at the children's hospital? Is that the very first time you've had a role like that?
Yeah, actually in clinical practice, for sure, as members of the Georgia Society of Anesthesiologists, over the years, people had invited me into some leadership positions in the society. I never really saw myself seeking out those positions, but it turned out to be a good learning experience for me. And if you're willing to take on leadership roles, sometimes you get more of those. And so at some point, I was the president of the GSA for a year.
And I guess you had mentorship there of people that recognized the need. To your point, I find there's always leadership, or good leadership is in short supply. The demand outstrips the supply, like many things. So that's great. I mean, I don't want to hog all the conversation.
I was going to say, I think I came into those roles in a way that is many of us do find our way. I think there's some natural born leaders that are they have an innate desire and a passion to lead, whether it's people or a company or a business, and they will seek opportunities, and often they find them, and opportunities find them too. They will find those people who want to be leaders. And then there are others of us, and I put myself in this category. I think other people see some characteristic maybe, and they want to give you a chance. They want to give you an opportunity. If you say yes and you do a good job, sometimes you'll say yes and it's not the fit. You have to back up and say, this is not for me. But I think I fell into that role, and those people maybe saw something and they wanted to give me a chance. And so I said yes to a lot of those roles and enjoyed them very much. And then I think there's some people who are leaders and don't even have a title. They're they're just good people that you wanna mimic their behavior and their characteristics and their integrity and honesty, and they're leaders without even knowing that they're leaders. That's kind of the 3rd class, I think. So
I have a follow-up question for you. So when you first began at Eccleston, you said that was your first clinical leadership role. And how was that experience for you? Did you feel like you fit right in as a leader, or did you have to take any courses or any sort of training, or did you find a mentor to help you learn how to be a good leader?
well, fortunately, the leader who was stepping back from the role was still there,
Okay.
and I did ask an awful lot of questions of an awful lot of people. I didn't feel like a natural born leader. That was not where I came from. But I did enjoy the challenges of trying to be collaborative and, pull people together, and, you know, I feel like if you have a vision that you really believe in and you can be the cheerleader for it, you can bring other people along to the same level of enthusiasm that you might have for whatever you're doing. So I always felt like it was an honor to be asked to be in that role. And, I had good mentors. Like I said, the leader who'd been there for a long time was still there, and they had taught me so much. I don't remember taking a course, although Children's, did offer, like, a leadership academy over the years, but that was after the children's hospitals had merged,
I see.
and, so I was in that role whenever the 2 hospitals merged, and that was very much a challenge of bringing 2 medical staffs together. Um, and that took a whole army of people to do that. Wasn't me, but I happened to be there and watched a lot of people make magic happen.
I see.
And so
I think you said something very important, and I think that it's at least it's been true in my life, not just I haven't been in a leadership position like that, but we're all kind of leaders somewhere, whether it's at work or home or whatever, but you said you sought the advice of people around you and of people that were, had gone before you. And I think that that's important to surround yourself and ask questions and be humble enough to learn. And I don't know, that has served me well. That's for sure.
Yeah, and
I
also
agree.
want to add background for the audience. In the past, it's better now, but when you first took over as a
Uh-huh.
leader, I think that the leadership's sort of environment in medicine was very much male dominated. You're
Mhm.
kind of one of the mavericks,
Mm.
Yes.
being a woman in that space. Can you tell us a little more about what that was like? Did that have an impact on you?
Well, it did because I realized that I was kind of jumping into something that had the potential of slapping me down.
Mm,
And, I think every day I just tried to show up and, tried to nurture people that I wanted to bring along and to balance the, environment more than it had been. It was very much imbalanced at that time, but, um, to bring people to help other people come up,
mm.
and make people feel like, they want to be part of the mission and part of the vision. And, so I'm sure behind the scenes that I probably was not part of, there was many conversations about whether or not I was the person to lead or not, but at the end of 17 years, I thought, "Well, it must have been okay."
Yeah, for someone to out of the blue, they saw something in you that they saw that potential to be a leader, and I'm glad they made that decision. One time, one of the things that you made a big impression on me about what leadership is, and I just saw it in action. And I read the works of a person named John Maxwell. He's considered sort of a leadership guru of sorts. And this came up recently at some some other places as well, when people ask, what is leadership? One liner, what is it? And they said, leadership is influence. That's what John Maxwell said. It's nothing less and nothing more than influence. In the 17 years you've been there, you've had enormous influence over the people that you've led. And it's led to people downstream of that in different versions being inspired by what you showed them. So unfortunately, like I said, good leadership and good leaders, there's a supply demand problem. There's not enough supply and there's always demand somewhere. And we see too much these days of leadership that's just too transactional, in my opinion. Things where the values are that, or the things are authority or metrics can control and telling people what to do. But there's a much older model. Again, for me, I kind of follow the servant leader ethics, and that it isn't about power, but it is about influence. And I learned that from you. It's really about service.
Well,
What do you
there are
think?
many publications about, qualities of a leader, and influence is one of them. Vision and courage and resilience and integrity and serving from the heart sometimes.
Mhm.
But many of them, being compassionate and self-aware. I wrote some of these down today. Having
Mhm.
gratitude, um, and courage.
Courage.
Yeah, sometimes it takes courage.
Mm, I can
I think it
second that.
probably takes courage a lot.
Mhm.
And as someone who watched Dr. Bannister lead for a very long time, she's nothing less than amazing. She always balanced that compassion with integrity. And I mean, everybody always knew Dr. Bannister cared about them, which made us want to do whatever she needed. Or I think that everybody in the department would have said that.
I agree 100%. Now, you mentioned just Dr. Bannister, some values there. You talk about compassion and courage. How did you discover that those are the necessary components of effective leadership? Where did you get that insight?
Well, as I said, I've always thought of myself as kind of being a nurturing person, and I think if you show people you care about them, that's more important than telling them that, those are words. But if you actually can show them in your actions that you do care about them and you have compassion and you want them to do well, and that you're willing to support them, I think people realize that that's really you, that that's what's in your heart.
Mhm.
And I think it has to be you have to be fair to everyone. But there's some people who need a little more guidance and nurturing, and steering, quite honestly, to stay in the
Mhm.
boundaries.
Mhm.
But I guess the nurturing part, I don't know where that came from. I mean, maybe just from being a nurse early on or somewhere, but I've always felt that I was nurturing, and I try to have compassion for people because people are going through different things, in life, and we never know what people are facing. So sometimes listening more than you're communicating is equally important because then people know that you care about them and what they're thinking and that they're heard and valued. So sometimes listening more than speaking lets people know that you care about them.
I just love this stuff. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
I do
Doctor.
appreciate you giving me more attention in the past.
Well, we tried, John. Some people are hard cases.
But I wonder who. But I love what you just shared because I went to a lot of people think, oh, that just sounds all warm and fuzzy, right? But what about the output on the ground? What about efficiency? What about, and those are all important. I think that what I really appreciate about you, you have this faith and trust and confidence in what you just said. That is not just the warm and fuzzies, but that in my experience, and you taught me this, you get better outputs out of people and you help people realize their potential. But it takes being treated like a human being with dignity. And it takes that insight, and that nurturing means different things for different people. And of course, you need to have accountability and other things. Far too often we forget that. And I think that a lot of places, and maybe a lot of institutions don't even have enough faith to say, hey, you know what? If you treat people like people, yes, there's accountability, but there's also that you see them as a human being and don't take their humanity away. You'll actually get this synergistic teamwork, because it's no easy thing to be in charge of an anesthesia department that takes care of, in Dr. Bannister's case, they took care of the sickest children in the city. We're talking about organ transplants, heart surgeries, coordinating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 3 coverage for those patients who are our most valuable people, to take care of them and to coordinate a team. Because, of course, you were responsible for anesthesia providers, Dr. Bannister, but of course, there's surgeons and other specialty doctors on the other side with the nurses and the technicians and the entire team. That's a very complex thing. So how did you navigate that? So what were the challenges that you, especially the first few years, getting into a leadership role for the first time at a major academic institution, pediatric hospital? What were some lessons you learned from that?
Well, as Eva said earlier, I think it's important to surround yourself with good people. I was fortunate enough to be in a place where we already had good people. We had people who wanted to mentor young people like myself coming along. And then we had excellent surgeons and nurses. And I felt like everybody was there for the same common cause, and that was to give expert care to the kids and reject mediocre care. But you also have to stay in your lane. Sometimes you don't want to outstep our boundaries. I think as long as we're focusing on doing our job the best way that we can and making our department shine and have people know that we're there with the best intentions, a lot of the challenges kind of fall away because they know you want to do the right thing for the right reasons.
Yes, thank you for that. I think we work better when you've used this word more than once: collaboration, consensus, and because we are tribal, team-based creatures, I think that we're sort of designed in that way. But one thing I think that we as the host and the audience can appreciate already is that you had this clarity about what informs and helps you make decisions as a leader. You've already mentioned that. And you had this clarity that also is calm. It's calm here. Have you ever been on a podcast before? I don't think so, right?
No.
I could never tell, because there's this clarity with calmness. And that's one thing I've always noticed about you.
Mhm.
I think, did someone else have something to ask, Dr. Bannister? I just wanted to make that comment about I just appreciate that clarity.
No,
that you frame.
my children, I don't know that they've seen Dr. Bannister since they were very little, but they've heard a lot about just her integrity, but that calm under pressure and clarity, that is not easy to pull off. And I have seen her in some high intensity situations, and she could just be clear-headed, make decisions, and I think that is incredible.
Agree.
Sometimes there's calm on the surface and turmoil underneath.
Yeah.
Well, that's
no
a
one
skill
will
too.
ever know.
No one will ever know.
Well,
we mentioned.
I do try to stay calm, because when everybody is either mad, upset, screaming, or whatever, the entire
We've seen it.
room changes.
Yes.
Everybody in the room changes. Everybody's on edge. You can no
Mhm.
longer focus on what you're trying to do because whoever's screaming in the background. And so I think that staying calm, or as calm as you can, helps people kind of focus on whatever the issue is at hand.
Is that more your disposition, you think, or did you learn that along the way?
It's probably both.
How would you
Do you-
say these leadership skills that you've picked up along the way, and some of it we're saying is your disposition, how has that translated into your home life as a leader?
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you let it all out at home?
There you go.
Well, I don't have a dog, so I don't have to come home and kick the dog. So, well, I mentioned kind of having a mission for work. My home mission was to try to be a team player as a parent because parents are a duet and they have to work together. But for children and other family members, just making sure that you emphasize and commit to your priorities. And for me at home, it was faith, family, and then country. And so I've always relied on my faith. I I I wanted to make sure that my son felt like there was something bigger than humans, bigger than parents, grandparents, teachers, leaders, that if you can find something to anchor yourself, and for us, it's people put their faith in different things, but if your faith can be an anchor, and I think that was important for my son to know that, at the end of our journey, there's potential for something much better than this daily drudge walking through with the daily life. There are rewards for just maintaining faith. I feel like children sometimes feel like they don't have a goal or an aim in life or something to shoot for. If they can have that anchor, whatever it is, whatever you impart to the youngsters that you're bringing along who don't have the life skills that some of us have, that I think it helps them in the long run. Because when times are tough, I mean, they're tough for everybody. And for kids these days, my goodness, I feel for them and all the challenges that they have. But if you can pull that faith in and realize there's a bigger picture, that whatever we're going through might be bad now, but it's generally going to get better. And just relying on your faith sometimes is the best thing to do. So that's what I tried to do for my Lee. And I was blessed that he was a good kid. I didn't have much to do with that other than bringing him in the world.
He does have your genetics.
Well, he saw something in anesthesia that he liked, and, he still loves it. So, at home, those were my 2 goals was, making sure that my son knew where my priorities were and what my values were, and then being a good partner in parenting.
Ooh, that's great, Dr. Bannister. And I look at your life, so you have your professional life and the home life, and you have such a good way of describing,
Mhm.
again, I'm gonna use these terms, how it's guided and informed, and what you do at the workplace with the leadership there, what you do with your child and a partnership at home to, um, how we should navigate that. The way I say it is be aligned with the transcendent or metaphysical values. And it sounds like those have both informed how you made decisions in the workplace in terms of your management style. Another thing you said that people are always going through stuff. Obviously, you're up close and personal with your own child going through their challenges. But being the leader at work, and work is such a huge part of who we are. And that's why it's on this Healthy Out podcast. It's really inspiring what you just said. It was just, I don't know if I can really add to that other than say, wow.
Well, there's one
That's
thing
how I feel.
that you always say, David, that I agree with you, and that is if we all focus on not just what we're doing, but the why, why we're here, why we love our jobs, why we're put here to do whatever it is we're doing, then I think people work harder to just be an important part of, everyday life. If you understand and maybe we don't understand it, but if you can kind of think in your mind and your heart, what is my why? Why? Then it kind of gives everything meaning, I think, around me.
I agree. And you talk about why. Why is like I ask my kids, why do you exist? What's your mission? I mean, you can use that term as well. What's the mission of the anesthesia group? And what's
Yeah,
their vision or
exactly.
goals? And
Yeah.
what are the values and principles that inform? You mentioned all those things. You literally went line by line and give us that sort of organizational, I'm not, or just this structure in our heads to go, oh, why should I do this? And then that ties into how can you motivate people to be a better version of themselves?
Mhm.
to bring what they can to the table to make this anesthesia group better. Or I always say that, for us, for my kids and my wife, I call us team pay, right?
Yeah.
How can we make each other better versions of us
Yeah.
and help the other people in the family do the same? And not to oversimplify things, but you taught me that at the workplace. You taught also by example, because especially with children, I notice mine are also now, and they're no longer legal age kids anymore. But people have said again and again to me, and you may have shared this with me too, that they watch more what you do than what you say.
Mhm.
I think that dynamic kind of plays out as a leader in the professional space too, especially where they can see you. And one thing you told me is that you're never going to ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that
And I've
was
always
always,
said that.
she's always done that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I said, well, that's good to say that. That sounds great, but she actually did it. Going back
She
to the
actually
point
did it.
about my kids, I might say, well, you always say that, talk about that, Dad, but I never see you do it.
I have a question, because in that nurturing side, and as a woman in a male dominated, at least in the beginning, place, I mean, you do have to have some boundaries. People do have to be held accountable. I think it's a struggle to set boundaries and still be kind and nurturing. And I think that may be harder for women than for men, maybe. But you managed to do it with grace. And I don't know that I have that ability.
Well, thank you, Eva. I think, if you can let people know what the boundaries are very clearly, and then whenever people stray, you just have to be honest, but also private. You guide people in private and you commend them publicly. And the other thing that you mentioned about being a female, I tried to make males and females know that I cared about them, and wanted to know where they would want to be, at a certain point in their career. And if there's a way that we could get them there, then I was very supportive. And, sometimes you have to have hard conversations with people, but I think you just have to be honest. And that advice about giving 3 compliments before you reprimand somebody, I don't ascribe to that, honestly. I sometimes feel like people might think the compliments are not genuine. And if you have to guide somebody, bring them in and, number 1, ask how they're doing, first of all, because like we said, we don't know what people are going through, but then to go right to the honest topic.
Yeah. And I like the way you say guiding. And I think about that in my children when I had to discipline them. It really is more guiding them to keep them going in the right direction. And that term is, sometimes you have to have hard conversations and I'm sure do hard things to guide the person to make them who they want to be. I can't remember which coach it was, but it may have been Saban. I don't know. I can't remember which coach it was. It says, my dad used to tell me, I make you do the things you don't want to do so that you become the person you want to be.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned discipline. I think discipline is where we go when the boundaries are getting close, and maybe they've already been breached, but you have to sometimes use discipline and hard conversations to bring people back to where they need to be.
Yes. And, you just mentioned Coach Saban and teams, and obviously college football is very fun. People watch it for fun, but I'm a big fan of Nick Saban. And I'm sorry, but not necessarily Alabama football, but Nick Saban.
Come on, David, roll tide.
But his leadership, and people talk about that Saban tree and all, but his legacy really isn't, in the championships. Even recently, I think that the majority of coaches in the final 8, and certainly all 4 in the final 4 of the college playoffs, were people that coach underneath him, and he leaves a legacy, and it's multiplication. It's not about just the championships.
Mhm.
And Dr. Bannister, when I look at your career, I see the same thing. I see a Bannister
Mhm.
tree. In even the practice that I'm in now, I think it's a great practice. And your legacy lies in the people. Now, each of us are a little different. Your babies, your work babies, not Lee, but your work babies. But they took something really good and wholesome away from their time with you and becoming part of who they are. And our patients get to receive that. And that's true to all the places that you left, because I'm still friends with the people that where you first were the chief.
Mhm.
Tell
Mhm.
us about teamwork. So that's teamwork, right? So the reason I love Nick Saban, I love his mentees, especially Kirby Smart, showing my loyalties here. But he left him with something. I think that's where his legacy's at.
Mhm.
And those and whether it was the athletes and the coaches and what they took away, tell us about your insights about teamwork and how, like I said, it's not a little thing to bring an anesthesia team together. Teach us about how you bring a team together.
Well, I've never been in the military, but I worked with a fabulous military surgeon in Jacksonville who used to talk about the team approach in the military. And there's whole publications about it. Not that I've read any of them, but I think, for teams to actually be successful, you have to have like group think, a common goal, and to realize there's not my saying, but there's no I in teamwork. Is a group, and everyone has to work together and support each other. Uh, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, and in order to make a team strong, you have to be able to play on people's strengths and and then help them with their weaknesses. And sometimes it's not easy to do. You can have an outlier who doesn't want to be a part of the team or doesn't even want to go where the team wants to go.
Mhm.
And sometimes those people can be encouraged, and sometimes they need to go find their place.
Mhm.
If it's not on your team, fine.
Mhm.
You want them to find the team that they're happy being on, and it may not be the same team that I'm on, but we need to realize that people have different personalities and goals, and sometimes they don't meld.
Sounds like with
But
your
when they
mission.
do but when they do
Mhm.
meld, you have an awesome opportunity.
Oh, yeah, I believe I've seen it for up close under your leadership. And to your point, if their mission and vision and values and principles don't align, it's almost like a non-starter, isn't it? That's going to be very difficult to incorporate that person to help them become their best to where they can really uh, be a part of a good team.
But
Mhm.
what I hear throughout this whole thing is Dr. Bannister, you being a servant leadership, your leadership style, and it's very genuine. You are there to help them or help whoever's around you be the best they can be. And I don't know that a lot of people think of leadership as servant leadership, but it sure seems like that's the best plan.
Yeah, I've often thought about that. It's, I've never really, um, sought any
Mm-mm,
power. As a matter of fact,
mm-mm,
I always said as a leader, you're given a ton of responsibility and no power.
mhm.
Just fine,
Yeah.
because I wasn't after power ever, but I did really, really enjoy working with strong teams and the people around me. I wasn't looking for a job when I went to Jacksonville, but, when I got there, I found friends and a team. Not everybody was on the train to do trauma, I will tell you that from the outset.
Mm,
But we're the only freestanding children's hospital in town, and it was the right thing to do for the kids.
Mhm.
yes.
As a matter of fact, the only level 1 trauma center was an adult facility, and I visited them, and they had very limited pediatric resources,
Mm,
equipment even.
mm,
And so one of my messages to my team was, "Do you want your traumatized child who's in a terrible accident to go here where the blood pressure cuff that they're gonna use on your 2-year-old is for a small adult. And that would sometimes get their attention because you can kinda make it personal for them, and they would say, "Oh, no, you're right. I wouldn't that doesn't pass the My Child test."
Mm.
And so it was more about doing good projects, getting things done for patients and making it work well and doing it with excellence. Finally, everybody who was there, um, was doing trauma, and we had excellent anesthetists. We had none when I got there, but we had excellent anesthetists. We were fortunate to have people in town who wanted to take care of children, but they didn't have an opportunity because the children's hospital didn't have the anesthesia care team model. But the anesthetist helped us build that program as much as anybody did.
That's just great. And I want to tie this into you said so many things that a person that I follow named Simon Sinek. So you may be familiar with this work. He had one of the more, I think, viral TED Talks almost 10 years ago. His book was called First Ask the Why or Ask the Why. And I was like, why the why is important. You just gave it to us there. I mean, to inspire people to step up, to meet a need. You also mentioned the things what you focus on your life to live a good life. You said you started with faith, and another fellow that I follow name is Arthur Brooks. He has a position at Harvard now, and he's considered the happiness guru.
Oh.
And he'll tell you most people pursue money or power or pleasure or fame, but he said research bears this out. Where should you focus? What should you look at to accomplish joy or happiness? And he says faith. And he said and having strong family bonds and strong friend relationships. And the fourth thing he mentions is having meaningful work. He ties into something that serves. All this is again you called it the anchor, I call it the alignment with something bigger than us, higher than us, that brings it all together. Ironically, again, throughout this recording, this episode, Simon Sinek also has another book called Leaders Eat Last.
Mhm.
He says leadership is actually not telling people what to do or authority or power. And you said you never pursued power. Leadership is really, and he notices to your point about the military person. He said, notice in the military, the leaders do eat last. They have to make sure their soldiers eat first. And I think that you give up your rights as a leader because you are responsible and you got to bring people together to help them realize their potential for something that is hopefully for the group an agreed upon mission and vision. That do I have buy-in from you that this is the mission? And I think that just the story you just told us about establishing trauma care in a region that did not have adequate care previously to inspire people to get buy-in from people that are reluctant.
Yeah.
Right. And to get buy-in. And of course you can say, no, if you got there's this way, there's highway, but you're never going to win hearts that way.
Yeah.
The best of human motivations and incentives. Again, this is how do you incentivize somebody? How do you motivate somebody? How do you get that buy-in? You've done it several times. The minute I started working with you, even as a medical student, I had instant buy-in. I got to be a part of this place. If she's a leader, I want to be a part of that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, you're right that when this was probably before your time, David, maybe before all of your time, when um, Eggleston was actually acting like a level 1 trauma center, but we did not have a designation.
It wasn't before my time.
Grady was our level 1 trauma center,
Yeah, I remember.
and a
Yep.
lot of kids would get sent there, and then, it was after CHOA came
Mhm.
that,
It was.
that they decided, "We've got the resources, and this is the best place to take care of children who
Mhm.
have been injured." And so that it didn't happen overnight, but it happened, and the good thing about actually accomplishing the level 1 designation is that you can compete for grants and other resources to improve the trauma services that we were able to give kids, and so that was kind of the basis that I used in Jacksonville, was that this is really the way that children need to be taken care of, and we're the ones to do it. I would tell everybody in Jacksonville, everybody thought that the Jaguars were the city's number one asset, and I said, "Nope, I think it's the Children's Hospital.
Yeah,
It's
I
the
love
number
that.
one civic asset in Jacksonville." So, because the Jaguars stunk back then.
Yeah.
No, we didn't.
Yeah. Well,
We were
that's
good.
awesome. So you think about, that the legacy, the children getting better care there because of the team that you led. So now let's kind of tie this all together. What is your most joyful moment or your most satisfying part of your leadership legacy?
Well, I'm not just blowing smoke here, David, but to see you and Ken and Akiko and Eva and Annie and John and
Bannister
Cheyenne, of
tree.
course, Cheyenne. Um,
Babies.
but to see you guys shining every single day and doing such a good job at what you do, like I said, I was so honored to be able to come back to be a part of this again. I feel like I'm full circle sort of, and that is joyful for me. And then,
Right.
of course, on a personal level, for like I said, my son must have seen something in anesthesia that he liked. And seeing him as the husband and father that he is to my
Mm.
precious little granddaughters
Mm.
is joyful every day.
Mm.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Did you ever, I mean, for me personally, there's two questions I have. One was, I think it's really, how did you balance such a high level career and being such a wonderful mom? And also, is there anything you would do differently looking back now?
Well, I probably missed a lot of things that Lee was doing as he was growing up as a resident and young faculty member and
Mhm,
being on call and that sort of thing. But
mhm,
that's what you do when the job needs it. And but otherwise, when I was not at work, I tried 100% to be about the family. And I try not to bring work home. And I know mentally sometimes we bring things
mhm,
home with us.
mhm,
But I tried not to do like other obvious work, taking away time from the family and just to let the family be the focal point when I was there, just like work was our focal point when we're at work. And what would I do differently? I'm never thought of myself as being a micromanager, but I think I probably could delegate better um, along the way, and maybe be better at time management.
mm.
There are probably many things I should have done differently, but
No, I don't think so. I
No,
think
I don't. I think
I'm
that
sure there
your
are.
I
your legacy speaks for itself. So as I think about the key takeaways, I think about the big thing of servant leadership, and it means a leader takes on the role of a servant. I think especially during this Lent and Easter season, Passover season, we see this idea in the faith traditions of Jesus being someone who would wash people's feet. And as a leader, for the welfare and well-being of members of that team that are your followers. So, and then for that team to be an effective one, we really want to think about building one by surrounding and composing the team of good people all the way around. People that have a sense of mission and vision and are really motivated with good incentives to try to make everyone better. Some key attributes, I think, of being a good leader, again, that Dr. Bannister just really displayed this on the highest level, is she said it, I believe, in, you have one mouth and two ears. So think about listening more than speaking. I think that's going to be key. A lot of times we always have thoughts that we want to express, but maybe to get the best yield out of your team, to have a better functioning team, and to perform as a leader on a higher level, listening to what your team has to say more than you are in terms of speaking to them about what your thoughts are and things. I think that might be the right ratio, 2-to-1. Another thing I think that Dr. Bannister has showed us, that you got to have courage. You're asked to go into lands unknown. So many times when you take on a leadership position, you're encountering things where Not all of the obstacles are readily apparent. Not all of the potentials are readily apparent. And you want to go forth and lead with courage through those unknowns. And as things develop, be able to pivot and have the courage to make decisions, some of which do require courage in the face of unknowns or in the face of obstacles. And remember, leadership is not just a hat that you wear in the workplace. For many of our audience members, your biggest leadership moments may come at home, and that looks different from leadership in the workplace, especially if it involves marriages or children. I think that in order to lead well, we need to have some reliance and foundations on faith and higher level values. Things such as love, truth, sacrifice, courage. I think those type of values, we really need to use those as foundational pillars to build our leadership upon. Again, whether it's the workplace or at home. A good example of that is if people are fortunate to be in a two-parent home, the two parents are partners with each other, collaborating together with consensus about how the family is going to be run, what decisions are going to be made, and how the two leaders can be good partners at parenting to produce the best outcomes. And that requires that both partners be a better version of themselves. And I think it is the hope of any parent to help their children be the best version of themselves. Simon Sinek, one of my heroes, says, first ask the why. Why should you be a leader at the workplace? And that doesn't even mean that you need to have an official title. Why should you be a leader at home? Why are you here and why are you doing this? And I think that one key version of that why is for us to find joy and satisfaction in this life. Make sure you set proper boundaries depending on what you would like to accomplish and what you think your priorities are in hierarchy of values, hierarchy of missions and goals. And, in my life, and I think this is true, the highest value is love, which is many people define as willing to go to the other. And supporter is truth or honesty. So you have to be honest about what you want.
I've said it to various people that you guys are you're kind of like the anchors of work right now for me. And I love what we do. I love the people that I work with, which is why it's hard to step back and retire. But it's time. And like everybody says, I want to do it before somebody tells me it's time. It's time. But it really has been an honor and a pleasure working with you all and doing the interview. Thank you for asking me. I've enjoyed just having a conversation.
It's been our pleasure. Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for agreeing to do it.
Thanks for the invitation.
If any of this has helped you, please share it with your friends and family. If you feel like this is anything you can take away and help other people, please share.
Alrighty, guys, you've been listening to Health Yeah with Cheyenne, David, Eva, and John, bringing you the medicine, the mayhem, and the laughs every week. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember, health isn't about perfection, it's about progress. So go out there and live your best Health Yeah life.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only, and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your specific situation. All opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The hosts and producers assume no liability for actions taken based on the content of this podcast.